NifnexTV. NifnexTV is where small business challenges get addressed by a panel of experts. And today's case study is a very interesting one. Is productivity and profitability. So productivity, we've got a technology expert here, Brett Patton from Telstra Business Centre, Morley, and we've got Dominic Ingelter from William & Hughes with a legal perspective. However, making an assessment, are we profitable or risking trading, is an important question from a profitability point of view as well. So can we go to you, Brett, first? And if you could do a very quick introduction, a better than one I did for you.
Well, I thought you did particularly well. Yeah, look, Brett Patton, I'm the Regional Manager for the Telstra Business Centre here in Perth and the Telstra Business Centre in Geraldton. We cater to small business customers, so the technology is something that's dear to my heart, and clearly the case study we're doing today is really around technology and how that can increase some productivity. Backed by popular demand, I was here a couple of weeks ago, and I think we're on the same panel. It might have been Chi, and Chi was talking about how to stay away from technology to sort of free up some time for yourself. I go the other way. Technology, for me, and certainly for small business, when we talk to small business customers, does give them the ability to free up a lot of their time and a lot of their day. For instance, right now, I think the last stats that came out from the ACMA was 53% of people working in businesses only sit in front of a computer, 47% are out on the road.
Wow.
So that's a huge stat, and I'll actually show you with technology that a lot of tablet devices and smartphones are actually outselling the traditional desktop and the laptop. So it shows you that business now isn't behind a desk, isn't in an office, it's actually out on the road. 47%.
I'm one of them as well.
Are you one of them? Yeah, and I am too. So I'm out on the road a lot of the time, seeing customers, doing ride-alongs with my staff, and it's very important that I get access to a lot of my information. Emails is something I live and breathe by. But we're tending to find nowadays with a lot of customers, certainly in siloed customers like manufacturing, a lot of retail, and a big one for us at the moment has been real estate. And people with mobility or mobile sales forces that go out on the road, instead of plumbers, for instance, instead of going out there doing a job for an hour and a half, writing out the invoice, having to drive the invoice back at the end of the day, submit it to the admin, do it all up, send out the invoice to the customer to be paid, it takes a lot of time and a lot of effort. We're tending to find plumbers and a lot of our small business customers are getting quite savvy around technology, and they're using it to help them to save some time, to be more profitable in the sense of accepting payment there and then with the customer. And tablets is a great way of doing that. Smartphones is a great way of doing that. So you're out on site, you can actually pull up the apps. GeoOps, a very good app that a lot of customers are using at the moment. Produces invoices, they can sign it, send it away, bang, it's all done and dusted. So technology for me is close to my heart, and it does actually work for small business customers. It helps their cash flow, gives them time back in the day.
Great points there, but technology generally scares small businesses because you mentioned apps and you mentioned
it does.
All this
it does.
They go, is it easy for me to learn?
Absolutely. In today's market, certainly, like I said, the trend is that smartphones and tablets are outselling laptops and desktops, and so there's a real need, and the consumer really love technology. That's why they're buying it.
It's easy enough for them to
use. Look, at the Telstra Business Centre and Telstra, we make it easy for them to actually understand the technology, to use the technology, and we talk to them about their business and what their business drivers are, some of the issues they have, and how the technology we can implement into their business to make them more time back in the day, which they love, small business love that, but more so how it's going to be profitable for them. So it's an easy transition from the old way of thinking, paper-based thinking, to moving into the 21st century and using these devices with all the apps and that come with it.
Well, I have met your staff, and they they speak plain English.
Well, I hope so. Yeah, part of our EEO policy. So, look, they do. We want to be a trusted advisor. Certainly, trusted advisor to small business. We're not there to go out and sell something to you. We want to understand what your business are. Your business drivers are, some of the sticking points, some of your hot topics, and we try to devise a solution around what you're trying to achieve in your business. So, like I said, Telstra Business Centre in Morley, Telstra Business Centre in Geraldton, and the Telstra Business Centre throughout the metro region in WA are very good at understanding small business needs.
So Telstra productivity, fair enough.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Dominic, can we sort of come to you in regards to, now we're talking about profitability here, and the question we're talking about is making the assessment whether are we profitable or are we taking a risk when trading.
And certainly, what are the risks of trading if you're not profitable? So look, I mean, generally, and I'm taking a slightly different slant on it, I suppose, to what we've just been talking about, but generally speaking, you're going to be trading as a sole proprietor, so trading in your own name, or you're going to be trading as a company. You might have some other structure, there might be a trust structure there, but the trustee is going to be a person or it's going to be a company. So evidently, if you're trading in your own name, you're going to be personally liable for whatever the liabilities of the business happen to be. On the face of it, if you're trading through a company, you're not going to be personally liable, except for those things that you agree to be personally liable for. It might be a guarantee on a lease or on a loan. You might have some tax liabilities that you're going to be caught up with and be personally liable for, whether you like it or not, as a company director. But generally speaking, there's meant to be this separation between you and the company, and you're not going to pick up that personal liability. But that doesn't mean that you don't have to care about what happens with the company, because it's all alright. It's just what's happening to the company. It's not going to affect me. And doesn't mean you don't have to worry about your financial records and going over your books and that sort of thing. And one good example of that is if a company doesn't create and maintain its financial records, then a presumption that it's insolvent operates, and that won't matter while everything's just smooth sailing. But the problem then arises down the track, something goes wrong. The business has some trouble, perhaps a liquidator gets appointed, and then you've got trouble with the liquidator saying, well, you're presumed to have been insolvent for X amount of time. So the company might only have had trouble meeting its debts for, say, 12 months. But you might not have bothered with keeping your financial records for 4 years, and so all of a sudden you've got a presumption that you've been insolvent for the last 4 years. Well, how does that affect you? Well, it does in a few ways. I mean, firstly, the liquidator's going to be going back and checking your transactions from maybe 4 years ago. There might have been dividends paid, loans given, property disposed of, or whatever, and these might now all of a sudden be subject to the possibility of getting unwound and having a personal effect on you. Secondly, it increases the period over which you as a director might be personally liable for the company's debts. You might say, well, what's this? What personal liability are you talking about? Well, if you're a director, if you're causing the company to incur a debt at a time that it's insolvent, then you can be, the court can order that you compensate the company for the amount of that debt, so that the company's not out of pocket. Okay, so that's a real risk for you. Now, you might be able to rebut the presumption that the company wasn't insolvent, even though it didn't have its financial records. But that makes it a lot harder for you. So it's a good idea to keep your financial records going along the way. Putting aside this presumption that I've just mentioned, and generally the test as to whether a company is solvent or insolvent is whether it can pay its debts as and when they fall due, generally from its cash resources. So it's a cash test, it's not a balance sheet test. So you might say, look at your company and say, well, look, we've got an excess of assets over liabilities, therefore I'm not insolvent. That's not really the test. The question is, have you got enough liquidity there that you can pay your Synergy bill, your Telstra bill, as it comes in? Now, if you've got a temporary period of illiquidity, that's not necessarily a problem. It's when it becomes endemic that it's a real problem, and you probably are insolvent. But that's just something that you really do need to watch out for. You do need to keep an eye on your figures. Are you actually profitable? What's the plan? What's the trend for the future? And really do keep an eye on it. Because sometimes these claims for insolvent trading, that you've been a director and you've caused the company to incur a debt when it's insolvent, they can be quite significant. Mainly, they're usually ATO debts. That's normally a big one. Your BAS, which is your GST, your fringe benefits, your pay-as-you-go. Also your superannuation guarantee. Sometimes ATO debts, they push you out into the hundreds of thousands. Also, you might get caught by something fairly simple. A family member might have loaned some money in. Family member probably doesn't care too much about being repaid. If the company goes belly up, the liquidator might step in and say, well, hang on, I'm going to force you, the director, to pay that money back into the company, and then I'm going to distribute it pro rata to all of the unsecured creditors, not just the poor old person, family member that's loaned it in. So you can be caught there, so you've got to be fairly careful. So I've got 4 tips for you. I mean, the first one is obviously create your financial records that adequately explain the financial position of the company. Just do it, even if it's just your small little company. You might as well just get in the habit, get started and do it.
How do you do that again? Sorry, just to interrupt.
Well, it's just a matter of making sure you've got something in paper that shows you your money coming in, shows your money going out, that explains if there's loans and money moving around, sort of where it's going. Just so someone's got something there.
Yeah.
that explains that gives you an idea as to where your company's going. And it might just be your general management accounts.
Yes.
You might do some end of year financial accounts. No strict requirement to do that, but as long as when something happens and you've got the papers that you can hand over and you say it shows what all the main transactions are. A lot of people just don't worry about it. They just run the company as if it's their own bank account. They just take money in and out and don't really worry about recording it anywhere. So do that, create some sort of financial record. The second thing is keep it for 7 years from the date of the transaction. No good to keep it for 4 years or 5. Okay, the statutory time limit is 7 years for it, and I think that's the same normally for your taxes, 7 years as well. So it follows on with that. Third thing is get your BAS lodgements in on time. Give some preferential treatment to the ATO. And the reason why you do that is because some of your tax debts you can be personally liable for. Okay, your BAS lodgements. Number one, you have to get them in on time now. And then number two, if you don't pay your BAS lodgements, then you can, as a director, become personally liable for them. You have director penalty notices issued against you. So give the ATO. Normally the ATO gets left out, and that's why the legislation's changed a lot. So they've got much stronger powers now. So if anything, if you're going to prefer someone, prefer the ATO. At least in respect of the debts that you might become personally liable for. That's the third tip. And then the fourth one is just a general comment. What's your bottom line? Don't be afraid to speak to someone, particularly speak to an accounting person, and be useful, particularly if they've got insolvency background. There's a lot of them around, or alternatively speak to a lawyer with insolvency background if you've got any concerns about how your trading figures are going, or whether you might be, you might be at risk of insolvent trading or some sort of claim against you. Be proactive.
Fabulous. That's a lot of things that I didn't know about at all. Although we have spoken about this a few times. Thanks, Dominic.
It's always a risk,
Yes.
particularly for small business. You're starting out without a lot of capital, and there is that risk that you have to take at the start. But maybe just set yourself a time frame of 6 months or something, and then go in and assess it and say, look, is this going to work out? What are my plans? How am I tracking?
Yeah.
Make sure you've got all your financial records there, and that you can make that assessment and do it properly.
Fabulous. Does anyone have any questions from the productivity or the profitability point of view? No.
Brett, from a technology point of view, how critical is it to have all your technologies fully interfaced, your emails and just all the different, especially if you have a mobile team?
Oh, look, it's crucial, absolutely crucial. There's a real, I guess it's not a niche catch around at the moment, it's called Office 365 or cloud. Cloud is the big catch cry at the moment. We're tending to find that people or businesses that move into a cloud environment are, I think at last stats, I'm big on stats, but don't quote me exactly on this. So I think it was about 20 to 25% more profitable moving into the cloud. It turns into more of an operational expense type model rather than a capex. And you move all your servers into the cloud, your emails into the cloud. You can such facilities like LinkedIn, which is video conferencing, those type of options that are available through sort of the cloud technology, and it also frees up some cash. So to the point around, do small businesses spend $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 on embedding a server at their site, or could they be better off spent putting that into the cloud and paying ongoing fees and management fees around that? So look, it absolutely is critical. And it just frees up a little bit of cash flow, to the point around, making sure you're watching your bottom line and you're just not, throwing money away willy-nilly. And it's critical for small business because cash is king, as we know.
Any comments on the comparison between Office 365, as you mentioned, and Google Apps for Business?
Yes, we could probably take that offline. It's a little bit involved, but look, Office 365, certainly Telstra's T-Suite of Office 365 is a little bit more involved, certainly from a service level guarantee standpoint. I'm not going to talk about Google because it's not our product, but I can say from a service level guarantee, we embed a lot more into our Office 365 and our Telstra T-Suite style of products around our cloud and our guarantees.
Sue.
What's the downside for a small business to move their core functions and information management into the cloud? Do you have any tips for the traps for the unwary?
Yeah, there's no downside. We're trying to move small business customers into seeing nothing but upside around moving it from an office-based into that cloud environment. I guess some of the big questions that we are fronted with around small business is security. What happens to my information? It's my information, it's my IP, do I lose that? And the answer is no. We're heavily secure as far as capturing that information and storing that information. To Google's point, I think if you do some research, there might be a little bit of difference around how Google do their security around the information that is captured. Certainly around the Office 365 and Telstra T Suite, it's a lot different, a lot more secure. And so we give some certainty, some security around how small business can move it from on-site back into the cloud.
To quote a phrase from a recent movie, nobody understands the cloud, but it certainly is becoming bigger, isn't it? Just one of the things you need to watch out about with the cloud from a legal perspective is who owns the stuff that ends up in the cloud, and where is the cloud based, if you want to call it that. Is the cloud in Malaysia, Vanuatu, the US? So where's your stuff getting stored? So if something goes wrong and you want your documents and you've got some foreign entity who's got it, are you going to be able to get your documents back? But that's really just something you need to investigate when you're engaging with those sorts of products. I'm not saying that there's a problem there, it's just something you need to be aware of.
And that is key, and that's a real issue with small business, absolutely. Who owns it, where is it stored? So there's sort of things that we can clarify a little bit more. Certainly down at the Telstra Business Centre in Morley. Good plug.
With the good staff. Yeah.
Very good staff.
Of course, this Telstra's product has absolutely no downsides. But the astute shopper would be looking around and
Absolutely.
doing some comparisons. So what questions would you suggest they have in their mind as part of their evaluation criteria?
Well, a couple of the big things. Small business, cash is king. So what's it going to cost me? What's the ongoing cost? But the big one we tend to find, and we've touched on it, is really around security. How secure is my information? Where is it stored? If anything goes wrong, what's the worst that can happen? What's going to happen with my information? So talk security. Security is probably the number one key that you talk about if you're looking to move sort of into a cloud environment. That's absolutely critical to the business.
The accessibility as well, I would say. Cool. Any more questions at all?
I've got a question. Is that allowed?
Yeah, absolutely. Why not?
Just to some of these points around the small business and I guess the way they manage their finances. Are there any real stats around a lot of these companies or small businesses that tend to find and get tripped up in managing their day-to-day activities and tend to go under because of some of the, not paying taxes appropriately and not capturing that level of detail? Is there a stat out there, 1 in every 10, 1 in every 20 businesses that get affected by it?
I'd say it's a lot more than that. Yes, there are stats out there. I don't have them to hand. I'm not a stats man, but look, it's a higher percentage. More small business new startups fail than succeed.
It's a 52% survival rate.
Okay, and I would have thought that's a pretty conservative. I would have thought that's a pretty good number. I would have thought it might have been a bit higher. There's a lot of it's happening, and it's a bit hard to say when you're going through periods of whether businesses are going to succeed or fail. We had the GFC and we're expecting there was going to be a lot of insolvency work immediately coming out of that, but we ended up finding that no, it didn't actually happen. A lot of businesses managed to just hang on, which is great, but then fall off a bit later. So there's a lot of collapses still happening now from what happened a few years ago.
Why do you think that is, though? That they held off that extra bit? Is it more about I'm going to
that's
try
right.
to make this work?
I think that might be it. Yeah, people initially were just doing whatever was required to keep the businesses running. Maybe banks, other financiers were offering a bit more support.
Yes.
But at some stage, enough is enough, and people have sustained losses over a period of a few years, and then it catches up with them. So.
So,
Can I just underline a point that you made earlier about preferring the ATO?
Don't tell any other creditors I said that. We're not live, are we? But yeah.
From a small business perspective, you do not want to get on the ATO's hit list.
No.
Because you never get off. And get yourself behind on your BAS payments. I can understand, having been there myself, how awful it is to claw your way back. So, that would be my underlining that point that you made. Small businesses, massive trap.
And of course, you've got your penalty charges, your general interest charge, that sort of stuff that keeps rolling there. And we can often have good results. We've had a number of people that we've acted for with, I suppose, what you might call something along the lines of a hardship application. Individuals can make hardship applications to the ATO and say, look, I've got no assets, I've got no money. If I pay my tax, I'm not going to be able to eat next week. That's a bit of an exaggeration, but you can make those sorts of applications. Apparently you can't do them for companies, but we've done them successfully for companies as well, just trying to put a commercial position to the ATO. The ATO has been cracking down on that a bit lately, so it's been just winding companies up, even if it's not in their interest to do it, which is a bit funny, but it's just I suppose they're just sick of always being the one at the back of the line to get paid. So there's been a bit of tightening up about that recently. There's a lot of more ATO enforcement work coming out generally. But you might be aware that the rules as to direct penalty notices and BAS changed, I think it was mid-2012 perhaps, where you used to, a director only used to be personally liable for certain of its taxes if the ATO sent out a director penalty notice and gave the director 21 days to do something about it, wind the company up, put it into administration or pay the debt. So directors could just sit on it and then just wait till they get a notice and then do something about it within 21 days. Now that's changed, so you're just automatically liable for these debts, like these BAS debts, unless you've done your BAS lodgements on time. So make sure you get your lodgements in on time, then even if you can't pay them, so just at least get your lodgements in, and then you can worry about the payment issue separately, and then you might still have the opportunity to get out of the personal liability. You can look at that. But
Thank you. I think it's very informative. I think there was another question. Was that yourself, Nilesh?
Yeah, I just wanted to touch base on what Brad mentioned about security and Office 365 and advising small businesses on securing the data, and that's the main concern. But small businesses doesn't have often budget to secure those things and pay for those services which can secure their data and systems and everything. They prefer to go for open sources which doesn't cost them ongoing and running cost. So it's a catch-22 most of the time. If you want those services around, it's going to cost money. And being a small business, you want to go for open sources which is not secure.
Yeah. Look, my advice would be always go for something secured. How important is your information, really? We're tending to find customers will move and will migrate there from, like I said earlier before, the security around. There are some small businesses that still, and there's probably some in this room, that have very important information databases, and they get a hard drive and they plug it into the computer and they download it, and they do that every night, and they take that home with them. They store it in the back of their car. What happens if the car's, if something happens to the car, that information gets stolen, there's nothing you can be done about capturing that level of detail anymore. So it's all about what's right for your business at the end of the day. Cost is coming down and down, so really small business moving into that space, cost really shouldn't be an issue anymore. It's really around the solution that we can provide for that small business and how you want to use the technology that's out there for that. So cost really isn't a barrier to move into that world anymore.
Yeah, Microsoft is on that basis doing quite a lot to make it happen cost effective.
Yeah.
Still people are scared of going on.
Look, they are, and that's for businesses like the Telstra Business Centres to really educate the customers around that transition, around what the technology actually means to them. So it's getting an understanding. Again, it's getting an understanding of what your business does and what your goals are, and really formulating a solution around that. We want to be that trusted advisor to the business, and that's what we're trying to do. Certainly not just with the business centres, but in the consumer space as well with the Telstra.
Thank you.
I think so do you want to say something, Dom?
I was just going just very quickly. I mean, it's sometimes one of those things where people are worried about saving their pennies and they end up losing a pound. It's just one of those commercial decisions that you have to make, and it's like house insurance, for example, would be an example. The difference between this sort of stuff and house insurance, of course, is not just a security, but you're also gaining some benefit out of it. But it's always just a commercial investment decision that you have to make.
Well, I think it's a great conversation there. Thank you. Can we have an applause for the panel?
Oh, really?
And,
We're back by popular demand, will we?
Absolutely.